Suck my belly.
Hey everybody, how y'all doing?
Good evening.
If you just heard what Zach said, disregard that, please. Yes. Hey, so Conservatives of Texas, established 2019. We're here at Mr. Pfrimmer's place doing another little podcast. We're going to speak about the recent election that we had this last Saturday here in the city of Amarillo. How do you think that went, Mr. Jessie Pfrimmer?
Well, for the most part, it went well. I was disappointed in the fact that we didn't get 40% of our voting population out, but we did improve from prior years for local government when we were up around 14%. So we were above that, I think 18 to 19% involvement, but that's still really sick when this is the most important part of our lifestyle is our local government and how it involves our daily walk here in Amarillo. So I would have liked to see more citizens giving their opinion on who they thought was the person of their choice for these local offices.
Did you have any expectations, and how did those fare out?
Well, one big expectation, I was hopeful that the mayor that was chosen would win. And then to see him win at such a resounding number, that was very rewarding. I really appreciate the citizens of Amarillo recognizing that there was a problem in our former council, and he was definitely showing a different attitude while he was the member as a placeholder, that he did demonstrate some different value systems that I appreciated, and that he wasn't in lockstep with the majority. He was always a thinking person. And I appreciate the citizens recognizing that he's a thinking person. He's not one that just goes with what feels good. He goes with what he thinks is right, and he wants to hear the evidence before he makes a decision. And I'm glad to see the Amarillo citizens voted dramatically for that kind of logic. And at 75%, that was great. My hat is off to the Amarillo citizens for doing that.
I'd say so. And I think right here we have the number.
Do you have the number?
And the gentleman we're speaking of is Cole Stanley. Let's see how many votes he actually garnished for the mayoralship. It looks like here 15,978, and at 75.48%, as you mentioned. Frida Powell attained 3,885. I mean, that's a lot lower than a lot of the people that even ran for places 1 through 4.
I appreciated the citizens of Amarillo recognizing that disparity in logic from the former council leaders, and they showed that they did respect Mr. Stanley for his standing up for issues that had to do with, let me see the evidence before I make my decision. I'm not just going to vote in agreement because I'm part of a group. I'm a thinking individual representing the citizens of Amarillo, and I appreciate that logic. And
I do want to make mention, I mean, I've met Frida Powell several times.
Oh,
she's a sweet woman.
She's a great woman. She's really a nice woman. I like Frida.
I like her a lot. Don Collins, he got 532. Tanya Winston, 341. Sam Burnett, 316, and Jeffrey McGonigal with 116. You know, I like Tanya Winston a lot.
I like Tanya Winston over at the Freedom First Council with the mayor. She was really good. I really like what she had to say, but I'd already made my choice with Cole. But Tanya was really good. She was on top of a lot of the issues, and I'm sorry that she didn't run with some of the other positions on the board.
You know, I could see her maybe running for school board someday, or even board of regents.
She's a person that was on top of the issues, and I think she would be a good representative for the school board. I do too.
What's your opinion of place 1? How'd that turn out for you? What was some of your expectations there?
Of course, I was going with Kelsey Richardson because of Kelsey's efforts in other aspects of our government issues. Kelsey's been involved in some issues that I've participated with her in the North Heights part of our city, addressing some of our school issues, and she showed a vested interest in addressing some disparities that were coming out of our school boards conversations. And so I saw a person that stood up for values. She sent some letters out to government officials out of Dallas to address these inequities that's in our AISD leadership on regards to busing out of the North Heights area. So I watched that at Kelsey, and her energy and her intensity in doing those sites. I can't speak about Josh or even Dean. Josh is a fireman. I've talked with him. He's a good young man, but I never saw him involved in local politics like I did Kelsey. And Kelsey was involved with things that I thought was very imperative things that was addressing some weaknesses in our coming out of our school board and coming out of our city government. And I could talk about those city government problems where I thought I could probably talk to Kelsey about, and she would be sensitive to it.
Sure. So we have a runoff in place one.
Right.
Josh Kraft
Right.
received 89-36, which is 43% of the vote. Dean Crump, 68-34, looks like, and 33% of the vote.
Right.
I think that's going to fare out.
Based on what I've seen in signs and interest in the youthful person, I think it's probably going to go with Josh. Dean's a nice man. I've talked with Dean. He's got some pretty good ideas, but I think the youthful person of Josh and being in relationship to having some involvement in dealing with fires and commitment to things like fires, that just sounds like someone that's a little bit more active. He's not going to be sitting in the pew. He's going to show a little bit of that aggressive nature on the board, which I will be hopeful that I will see come from him being a younger person. And if you volunteer to be a fireman, that's a pretty big commitment that protects us all. And of course, it's out of Randall, but he's a good young man. We'll just see how well he can do if he should be selected as that place one candidate.
Okay. Is it fair to say that that's who you're backing in the runoff?
I'll have to say I'm going with Josh, yeah, just because I did like Dean, but I'm going to go with the younger guy.
All right. Well, place two, we had Don Tips. That was a huge margin.
Yeah, I went with Don
83%.
all the way. I was a Don Tips way early in the game. I don't know why, except I listened to him at some city council meetings, and I saw him perform at some interviews. And the other candidates, I didn't see them very much. And Don was out there with a little more energy and reality of going after that place. So I just thought he was working to try to be an influence, working with Cole Stanley.
Sure.
So,
and as you can see there, he received 17,000 votes. Misty Vigil, 1,790, and Gabriel McHenry Herrera, 1,499. And we did, you seen the interview with Misty?
I saw Misty. I talked with her.
What do you think about that?
Well, I saw her at High Plains Republican Women's when they had the candidates over there, and I visited with her for a short while. And she's a very fine young lady. I mean, she's got some good ideas, and it's a shame that we really had so many qualified individuals that are concerned about what's going on in our local government, that we've got these people volunteering to submit themselves to these board meetings and represent our value systems. I think Ms. Vigil would have represented us well.
Yeah. Well, I've had the opportunity and the joy to meet her, and as you've seen in the interview we had just a little earlier, I think she stand out. What do you think, Zach? What was your impression of
Miss Vigil? I think that if she runs for something in the future, then I would definitely vote for her.
Yeah,
I did vote for Don Tips because he seems like a natural at it, and he seems like the right guy for the job.
Yeah,
I didn't know much about her till towards the very end, so
I
didn't. But I do like her a lot.
Yeah.
And if she votes or if she runs for something in the future, I'll definitely vote for her.
And I will say that even Gabriel, at the forum, I like him.
I like Gabriel.
Yeah.
Listen to that young man. I mean, he came through really well at the Accelerate Church.
He's going to do some great
but
things.
he was.
I hope he doesn't end here. I hope he continues on.
I hope he stays in there. He seems pretty intense young guy.
But Don Tips, he's an outstanding candidate. I think he's going to do very well, and I love that he commented he's going to look at this through the biblical lens, which is awesome. It's fantastic. Tom Sherlin, place 3.
Mm-hmm.
11,956 votes. He got over 58%.
Yeah.
Which is, I know he had his brand out there from the previous. I'm glad he won.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be a determined voice there, and I think he's going to be a great asset to Cole Stanley and to Don Tips as well. And so we had Cat Massey come in second at 34%, 7,000 votes. John Adair. I really like John Adair a lot. I think he was very organic.
John was real good. I like John. I knew John from the past. I've had conversation with him at city council meetings, and
I'd like to see him continue on doing something for the city as well, and I think he will. Place 4, that like place 1 is in a runoff. We have Les Simpson that established 9,189 at 45%. Claudette Smith, 4,940 at 24%. John Ingerson at 3,218 votes. And Hobart Gunny Brown at 2,996. That race seemed to be pretty stacked and a lot more equal than the others on the vote tally there. That was a tough race.
That was a tough race. Place 4 really had some candidates. There's a lot of concentration on the voting population as to who's the best person for our individual to decide. So definitely went with name recognition with Les, I think. But some of the other 3 I don't think have that much name. I can't Claudette, because of her race 2 years ago for mayor, she had some grounds in conversation with different voters around the city that, wasn't she the one that ran for mayor a few years ago? And so that was one advantage that Claudette had over, say, Gunny Brown and John Ingerson. So John worked real hard on our Parks and Recs department, and he did get some very good things accomplished in recognizing that if we're going to have parks in the city, you're going to have to spend some money on it. And that comes back to the conversation we're going to be having with this council is our value system as how we spend our money. And Cole Stanley has been high on the fact that he's wanting to see that we do focus on what our city is pushing, not what certain persons want, but what the city says it needs. And I think some of these things like Parks and Rec will come under a greater scrutiny. The Thompson Park incident was a fiasco. Oh, that was horribly handled. And there's a lot of good evidence in the Memorial Park, the baseball diamond. That was not the fault of the former council, but it was a product of that ideology that we're going to get rid of an existing baseball diamond and put another baseball diamond downtown Amarillo so we can hit fly balls out into left field and take out the parking there at City Hall. It just frustrates me that we can't go and park at the City Hall without fear of our car being damaged if a baseball game is going on.
Sure.
And they have signs out there cautioning against parking at City Hall. And we didn't have that problem before they stuck that baseball diamond at that location. It's a baseball diamond, not an MPEB.
Yeah, it has bases. So this one's a runoff.
Yeah, this
Les
runoff,
Simpson
right.
and Claudette Smith. How do you see that faring out? How would you like to see that fare out?
Well, of course, I'm going to go with Claudette because I've seen Claudette at city council meetings for the past 3 to 4 years. She is just a dynamic person that brings, she just comes with evidence as to her positions, and she argues well. She presents her ideas. She's intense. She's an intense lady because she has evidence to support what she's saying. And she went down to Austin, Texas as just an example as a citizen, as a small business person representing her culture of small business people. She went down to the state of Austin to discuss this legislation with regards to the 6% over the appraised value limit. And she went down to argue it shouldn't be any greater than 2%, which was Abbott's presentation.
Mhm.
And she went down there to argue with Abbott that was the proper logical thing to do, that if you're going to have a 14% increase on property valuation, you shouldn't be looking for another 6% window on your tax rate. And she went down to argue against that she thought it should not be any higher because it affects our small businesses when you raise the valuation of taxes on their buildings.
Mhm.
Invariably, they will have to put that in the cost of their business, and that goes to their customer base.
Yeah.
And so it's just part of the cycling of cost of living, which when we had a practical government in all 4 districts, we don't have a medical district right now, but we're talking about getting one back. But we had some pretty practical people back in the 80s and 90s because we had cost of living was very dramatic. It was advertised that Amarillo had a low cost of living. And the Dave, I can't think of the guy's name. He's always telling you that you always buy with money. You don't go on credit.
Dave Ramsey?
Dave Ramsey, yeah. Dave Ramsey always advertised Amarillo back in the early 2000s, late 90s, that Amarillo was a place to go because of cost of living. You
Sure.
could buy a house in Amarillo for $80,000, and any other place in the nation it would be $120,000, $130,000. And he was saying that was because the cost of living was down, but not with these spenders that we have in our representatives
And
today.
so you're pleased that Claudette is going down to Austin on her own dime.
On her own dime to argue for the citizens of Amarillo and property valuation and what's logical with regards to raising the taxes on the homeowners and the businesses. Because when you raise the cost on the business, they're going to have to put that back in the cost to the consumer. And if you put it back on the consumer, the consumer's got to pay higher sales tax. So it just feeds into the cost of living, and you have to start looking for $20 salaries to paying for government and $20 an hour salaries.
So you've lived in Amarillo how long?
I've been here since 1967.
All right.
I got here working at Sandia Laboratories and walking back and forth for 25 years to Sandia. And the cost of living and that's what I always told people. Education was awesome in Amarillo. We had a great school system. We had the 3 grades at the high school level, and then we had the junior highs. And the junior highs had their own vocational programs. My son learned woodworking, and they did woodworking competition out of the junior high programs here at Amarillo. But they got rid of that in the late 80s, and with this middle school concept that came out of California. And it was sold by this superintendent of schools out of Georgia because we lost Anderson or Abernathy. I can't remember the superintendent of schools at that time. Been here 20-something years. But he's a very practical superintendent of schools. His salary was never anything higher than $80,000 a year. And now we're paying $280,000 a year for superintendent of schools, and our teachers are getting $55,000.
Yeah.
And
well, the reason I was asking you about your length of history here, I don't remember too much of Les Simpson. Do you remember him being a writer and some of these things that are mentioned as far as him endorsing, the previous council and Ginger Nelson? Do you remember any of those things?
I don't. I stopped taking out the Globe News in the early 2000s, and but back in the 90s. When we were dealing with bond issues back in the 90s, of course, I was against $1 million bond going in to build 4 new gymnasiums. And we took $100, myself and 4 other citizens in Amarillo took $100 each and put up our arguments against corporate systems and SPS. Because SPS is going to get the benefit over some of that investment. And we defeated that bond. And I was asked later on by the next superintendent of schools, Mr. Brown, to please don't fight against the bond issues. They had some classrooms that they needed. So we didn't fight against Mr. Brown, but we did fight against the philosopher, and he went down to Katy, Texas, and he got $150,000 down there, where we were only paying him 110 here. So
in this race, how do you think it's going to fare out, and who are you going to get behind, do you think?
I don't want to go against Les, because I think he's a concerned citizen, but I have some fears that he may be locked into what he thinks is best for Amarillo, but he doesn't know what I think is best for Amarillo.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is best for Amarillo is low taxes. And I don't think we can spend our way into a pleasant world with government. We, the citizens of Amarillo, need to take up some responsibility, clean up our own alleys, make certain we police our alleys, make certain we don't grow things in the alleys to make it difficult for the utility people. You need to uncover your own water meters, make certain your meters are easily to get to by the meter. There's just different things the citizens could do and take some responsibility and take it off of the taxes and the fees. So our city manager doesn't get $313,000 a year to manage $19 an hour for a guy to drive a truck to pick up our trash.
So what is it about Les that you feel that he's mentioned or postured in that?
I heard that he had some relationships with the more influential people in the city that have been sponsoring these tiers activities. They're called tax incentive, tax incentive reserve zones.
Mm-hmm.
And those zones, we got 3 of them now. And those are all set aside. It started off with downtown Amarillo.
Mm-hmm.
And we have AEDC, which we're paying a 0.5 cent sales tax for AEDC.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you buy something, it costs you 0.5 cent. It goes to AEDC to promote businesses into coming to Amarillo. Now we come up with the tiers to encourage that people develop their properties in a particular zone set aside by physical distances, like in downtown Amarillo. So those properties, they are evaluated, but their evaluation is held till 20 years. But in that 20 years, that property value goes up in valuation. Well, the growth in that evaluation, that tax money goes back into a pool. That pool is available to the individual businesses in that tiers area. And then they can go in and ask for that money so they can develop their property. Well, what's happening to the guy out here that's got a strip mall out here in town, and he's got to get businesses into his strip mall, but he has to pay his property tax increase values, but he's paying for the guy that's not paying for the improvements on his property down in the tier zones. Well, we got the tier zone 1 in downtown Amarillo. We got tier zone 2 out here on the east side, out here around Big Tex. And now we're going to have tier zone 3 out here in southwest Amarillo down with regards to Kids Inc. program, which is a great program. They're getting a lot of volunteers. They're getting a lot of good money contributing to that. But they've asked that the Amarillo College, they've asked that the county of Randall and that the water district of Randall and also the hospital district, which is right now we're not being charged anything in the hospital district, but some arguments are that the hospital district is going to be reestablished and we're going to have to start paying property tax towards the hospital district to take care of the indigent care at Northwest Hospital. So we end up with this kind of problem with where was I? I got so off where I was. Sorry.
We were speaking
You
about.
moved here in 1967.
I moved here in 1967.
Well, I think you're very knowledgeable. You have a lot of information, and I really appreciate you speaking on that. As far as this runoff, who are you going to get behind?
I'm pushing Claudette. I want Claudette. I've seen her working in the council. I've seen her working for citizen issues that affect citizens in Amarillo across the board, not certain groups of people, certain sections of the city. She's for what's good for all the property owners, not just for certain sections of our city. And And I think if we bring up issues like zoning in the North Heights area, she will start talking to the city manager about getting some zoning people to go really into the North Heights area and rezone the North Heights area so that they will know how to bring a developer in there and tell them this piece of property will be zoned for residential, or this piece of property will be zoned for commercial, and there won't be this confusion that's brought in, and we will have a city manager that will push that issue. And I would hope the council will push the city manager, because I worked with the North Heights for the last 8 years trying to get a zoning person out of the city government to go in there. And every time I went to a different meeting, there was a different person representing the city. So there was too many turnovers in the representatives coming to the city to discuss this problem in North Heights area, just on zoning. Well, you can't have a developer going in there not knowing what he can build in a certain area. Mm-hmm. And we did have one issue that came out where something was built in a certain area and there weren't any utilities at that location, but they were given the approval by the city government that he could build his business there, which was an apartment complex, and he didn't have any utilities. He didn't have water and sewer at that site, because the North Heights area was wells and septic tanks and other kinds of amenities, because it was an isolated area back in the 1980s and south of that. But once we get into the 90s, it became an integrated area. It's been growing as an integrated area. It's got a cross section of cultures in the North Heights area, and we need to get rid of the idea that that is a community of nothing but a dark brown skinned people. And I say dark brown people. If everybody looks at their melanin, it is brown. It is not black. And I would try to remind people that the melanin is the skin color, and it is a brown shade. It is not a black shade. So as we get to where we be honest about what's going on, the North Heights area needs to be given a lot of credit that they've been sitting there for 100 years. And the water is not adequate to put out a fire in North Amarillo. You put on somebody's washing clothes and watering their lawn or something like that, the firemen come out there and don't get enough water pressure to put out a fire. So I know they do the tests on the water meters. I talked to the fire chief about that, and he said, we do the test, but we do it at 3 a.m. in the morning. Well, who's out there watering their houses, their lawns, or actually washing clothes at 3 a.m. in the morning? Yeah, they had water pressure then, but when you get it in the daytime when you have a fire, there's no water pressure.
Well, Jesse, I appreciate your time. I wanted to get you on here to kind of share some of your knowledge, your wisdom, and your information. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Guys, sounds like Jesse, for place one, you're getting behind.
I'm going with Claudette Smith
for place four.
For place 4.
And then 1.
I'm sorry, for place 1, I'm going with Josh.
Okay. And then 4 for Claudette Smith.
4 for Claudette Smith. So please
how
forget.
important is it for the voters to exercise some due diligence?
I would love to see 40% of our Amarillo citizens get out and recognize that they need to get involved in the right that the servicemen of our country fought for your freedom to vote, and you're dishonoring the military people that go out and die in Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran thinking they're representing this country. And you don't even have the good diligence to go out and vote and show how much you appreciate their sacrifice. That would be my hope for this community, is that we quit sitting on our hands and try to get out there and express our value systems through our vote. And it would really be nice if we get 80% of our voters, but if we could get 40%, I would just jump through hoops to see 40% of our voters out recognizing these people represent us, and we need to know who we want to represent us at the school board. Well, no, these two candidates are just strictly for the city government. Mm-hmm. But we have some big concerns about Amarillo College. We have some big concerns about AISD. I love our county government in Randall. I think we got some great representatives in our county government. But I would sure like to see the citizens of Amarillo stand up in this upcoming runoff election and show that they really love this city and they want the people to know they're going to stack behind this city council and see if this council can do the right things for this city.
Well, Jesse, thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I'm Alex DeAnda. Have Zach Bice.
Hello, guys.
We are Conservatives of Texas, established 2019, and you heard Jessie Pfrimmer. He's going to go and get behind for place 1, Josh Kraft in this runoff, and Claudette Smith for place 4.
And I will be writing in Jessie Pfrimmer on all of it,
That's
all places.
Hey, thank you guys for joining us. Please share this video and get out and exercise your vote. Listen, in the runoffs, I just spoke to your neighbor across the street.
Great.
And she thought that I was picking signs up, and I said, well, no, there's a runoff.
Yeah.
She didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So listen, guys, we have to make sure that we are informing folks any chance we have to remind them that there is indeed a runoff.
Right.
And let's please get out there and exercise our civic duty as such. Signing off. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
All right.